or anything? And I said, well, I don't know, sometimes the sort of photographic reference points that you're using to create the abstractions, I thought maybe they were a little too noticeable. Like there's that scene where it's like you kind of abstracted this sequence of like horses running through a river or something, and he's just smiling while I'm saying this, like I'm just making a fool of myself as I'm saying this, because he said, there's none of that's there. None of that's all totally in your head. It's a completely abstract film that has no photographic basis whatsoever. And I was absolutely blown away because I was positive that he had made this film by taking photographic material and manipulating it in some way to abstract it. But he was so excited because I think that misapprehension and that confusion was something he was so interested in as an artist. If you were here last night, you probably had a sense of that in some of his work. And I love that the way you entitled the program and the quote from Fred that you use about how he's interested in what's happening between the frames rather than the frames themselves. That's really the key to a lot of this stuff, because there's a picture and there's another picture, but what happens when that first picture is followed by that other picture? And what's that magical, weird thing happening? Which in film has actually a shutter going in front of the gate of the projector, and you get that little moment of black. Digital is a bit different, but he found a way of working in digital, I think, that really suited him. But this notion of the progression of frames actually adding up to something much, much, much bigger than just the sum of the parts. And when I talked earlier about him being just this generous spirit, a lot of that for me has to do with how generous he is to an audience watching his work, because he's giving you a lot to do. You get a lot of homework in a way with his films. Like he's kind of asking a lot of you to meet the films, maybe even more than halfway in that. And I think of him in some ways as the term experimental filmmaker. Some artists don't care for that term, which I get. But I think of Fred in the purest sense of being really an experimental filmmaker, in the sense that he loved to experiment, literally, with what happens with this medium, just this incredible magic that you can never quite grasp what precisely is happening. Because it's partly a technological thing and a phenomenological thing, but also a psychological thing and a physiological thing that's happening that we have no control over, really. And he was absolutely fascinated by that. And he also loved that there was no real answer to it. It just was a thing that happened that we all sort of shared, but maybe in different ways. And his generosity for me as an artist comes very much from knowing that we're going to watch these pieces. The first one tonight in particular addresses a lot of this, actually, which is in a really fun and I think really brilliant way. But a lot of the pieces you'll see tonight, even though he's transitioned to digital, are so much about that interplay between what he's put there and what he's hoping you might get out of it. And with the notion that everybody's going to maybe get something a little different. But there's an exciting journey there, I think, a journey of perception. If you have a chance, if you become interested in Fred and his work, there's an incredible illustrated lecture he did that is called After Hours in the Cerebral Kitchen. Mm-hmm. And you can find it on YouTube. It's still there, and it's about an hour long. And it's first of all, it's a wonderful display of his personality and his presence, but also just all of the things that he's fascinated about in terms of perception and optical phenomena, both like from a technical standpoint and also like a really mystical, playful, like very human standpoint. It's all in that lecture, and I highly recommend you check it out. I'm excited to look at it again. Actually, we were talking about, we want to like watch that again since we're really deep in Fred land these 2 days here. But highly recommend it. After Hours in the Cerebral Kitchen. So this particular program, I had nothing to do with putting these programs together. It was all these guys, and they did, I think, an amazing job, because it's a large body of work. And you even are like, well, I'm sure you went over, like, do we mix the 16 and the digital, or do we do it chronological or not? And I mean, anything is on the table, really, for his work, I think, because he had some of the very similar concerns throughout his entire filmmaking career. But of the artists of his generation that really became known for their very intimate, very involved work with 16 millimeter as a medium, for me, a lot of them in the late 90s to mid 2000s made a conscious transition to video, usually at that point digital video. And not a lot of those artists who had done incredible stuff in 16 quite, I think, at least immediately found that way of speaking, whatever language was their personal language, in this new medium, because they're so totally different, these mediums. And I think of some like really bumpy kind of like transitional works by certain artists that I think are amazing artists, and who also then eventually made like beautiful digital work. But I think Fred, he made the most elegant, amazing, successful transition into digital that I've ever seen of any artist really working in his generation, that had like almost 30 years of 16mm already behind him, actually more than 30 years. And so this first film or digital piece tonight, it's called Amongst the Persuaded. This is his transitional film, you might say, and it is, I think what makes it work so well as a transition into digital is it's literally about that. That's the subject of the piece. And it's Fred arguing with himself and talking with himself about what does this even mean? What does a film image mean, a digital image, and how do they differ? And I won't get into it, he'll say it all.